The 1980s are widely considered to be the greatest decade ever for horror movies. It's filled with so many classics that it was almost impossible for me to choose just 10. Welcome to the Cinema Cult. I'm CT, and I've been getting a little more personal lately and going back through the decades to choose my top horror movie from each year. Now, I've covered the 2000s and the 90s, so now it's time to tackle the 1980s. Now, this decade was so packed, I actually had to come up with a rule for myself: no repeat filmmakers, writers, or franchises. Otherwise, half this list might just be John Carpenter and Stephen King movies. Now, as usual, I'm gonna have plenty of honorable mentions along the way, but this time, I'm starting at the end of the decade and working my way back. So kicking it off with 1989, this was a tough year for the big slasher franchises with underwhelming fifth entries for Halloween and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Plus, we had the oversold promise of Jason Taking Manhattan. Now, I've always thought Intruder was the best slasher film of the year, and I really dig the underwater alien ripoff Leviathan, but the best movie of the year, that one features a shunting scene that can't be forgotten. I'm talking about Society. Society was Brian Yuzna's directorial debut after producing movies like Reanimator and From Beyond. And this is also the most insane body horror movie on this list, and perfectly exemplifies this director's style that aims to both entertain you and totally gross you out. So if you're looking for a movie that's not subtle at all about its feelings towards wealthy elites, you gotta check out Society. It's the epitome of 80s horror that tackled the Reagan era head on, going well beyond questioning the greed is good crowd, and instead giving them the middle finger. Society follows a Beverly Hills teenager named Bill who's suspicious of his family. He just can't shake the feeling there's something wrong with them. And it's not just his buddy who dies in a mysterious car crash. Bill's also been seeing and hearing things that he can't explain. Now, everyone around him insists it's all in his head. Even his psychiatrist says he's being paranoid. Of course, Bill never could have guessed how right he actually was, and it turns out his whole family and their posse of friends were just gaslighting the hell out of this dude and setting him up to be the main course at their grand shunting event. Because in this society, the wealthy elites of Beverly Hills really are something other than human, and these freakazoids do more than just join hands. This shunting is a mass of conjoining bodies oozing together to literally consume unsuspecting members of the lower classes. It's absolutely disgusting, and it's absolutely a must-see.
You have to be born into society. Alien scum.
Moving on to 1988, and you got a couple of very clever takes on the slasher subgenre in Child's Play and Maniac Cop, plus a bunch of horror comedies I love, like Brain Damage, Night of the Demons, Dead Heat, and Killer Clowns from Outer Space. But my favorite movie of the year, it's one of the best remakes of all time, The Blob. 1988's The Blob is a radical re-envisioning of the 1950s low-budget classic. And this remake was written by Frank Darabont and Chuck Russell, who also directed, and that's the same team that unleashed Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors onto the world in 1987. Now, just like the original Blob film, there's a small town being invaded by a gelatinous creature from space that loves devouring humans and hates the cold, but this time it's a much more cynical take on the killer Blob story, where no one is safe and the deaths are absolutely brutal. And as if that wasn't enough, there's also the federal agents who have arrived, not to control this thing, but to see how this experiment plays out, because as far as they're concerned, this town's expendable. The Blob has some of my favorite practical effects sequences in any creature feature movie, and I just love how relentless this Blob is as it makes its way through town, picking off civilians and growing to monstrous proportions. The kitchen scene, where it literally rips a dude down through the sink drain, is both unforgettable and original. But I also love the theater attack scene, which was a clear homage to the 1950s Blob movie that works just as well in this go-around. Now, the whole thing culminates with a battle on Main Street that's absolutely epic and filled with even more of that incredible effects work. So if you wrote off this Blob as just another remake, I'm here to let you know it's well worth your time, especially if you like your effects extra goopy.
The men from Gladiator are showing us how to keep our leftovers fresh.
Moving on to 1987, there are almost too many great choices from this year, including classics like Hellraiser, Prince of Darkness, The Lost Boys, and The Monster Squad. It's also a year that featured some truly excellent sequels in Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2, Creepshow 2, and Slumber Party Massacre 2, not to mention my favorite of the year, Evil Dead 2. Is it a sequel? Is it a reboot? Does it even matter? Of course not, because Evil Dead 2 is arguably the greatest horror comedy ever made. Director Sam Raimi launched his career with the first Evil Dead movie, and with Evil Dead 2, he got a way bigger budget to pump up this entry with even more scares, more slapstick, and gallons of blood. Now, thanks to some licensing issues, Raimi couldn't use footage from the first Evil Dead in this entry, so instead he reimagined the events in the first film. And here we've got Ash Williams heading to this remote cabin in the woods with his girlfriend, where they discover an audio tape of incantations from the Necronomicon, also known as the Book of the Dead. Suddenly, Ash is fighting for his life against his possessed girlfriend, and then his own possessed hand. And the scenes of Bruce Campbell battling it out with his hand are absolutely some of my favorites, and they really show what a master of physical comedy he is. I also love the maniacal look on his face when Ash eventually chainsaws his own hand off. But the great thing about Evil Dead 2 is that it's just as scary as it is funny, and when four strangers arrive at this party of deadites, things go from bad to worse, with Ash Williams getting the brunt of it along the way. Evil Dead 2 isn't just a must-see movie, this is also one of the most consistently solid franchises in all of horror. Just check them all out.
Groovy.
Moving on, and 1986 might be the most stacked list so far, with too many good movies to mention. You got outright classics like The Fly and Aliens, plus a whole bunch of movies that are right up my alley like Critters, Maximum Overdrive, Chopping Mall, and Night of the Creeps. But my pick of the year, it's a horror crime thriller called Manhunter. Manhunter is the selection on this list that I can probably chalk up the most to recency bias, since after I rewatched Silence of the Lambs for my best horror movie of the 90s video, I had to go back and rewatch Michael Mann's take on a Hannibal Lecter story, and I gotta say, Manhunter is by far the better horror crime thriller film. Silence of the Lambs, that was about a young FBI recruit on her first big assignment. The story of Manhunter, that follows Will Graham, who's not a young recruit at all. He's the guy who put Lecter behind bars, and that victory cost him both physically and mentally, and even caused him to leave the FBI. But when a new killer dubbed the Tooth Fairy is crisscrossing the country and murdering entire families, Will is compelled to join the investigation. I love that this film focuses on the mental torture Will puts himself through to catch these killers, because his best weapon is his empathy. He's able to put himself in the minds of these killers, understanding their motivations, and literally seeing things the way a serial killer would. And speaking of, the performances of the two killers are also fantastic here. We got Brian Cox playing a version of Hannibal Lecter that's outwardly calm, but he seems to be seething under the surface, just furious that he's been locked up in a cage by this FBI agent. And then, well, there's the late great Tom Noonan, who's one of the best bad guy character actors of all time, playing this Tooth Fairy to creepy perfection with an extremely unsettling performance.
Have you ever seen blood on the moonlight well? It appears quite black.
Moving on to 1985, it was a great year for fans of the less serious side of horror, featuring a number of horror comedy classics like Return of the Living Dead, Fright Night, House, and Reanimator. Plus, some personal favorites of mine like Life Force, Day of the Dead, and Friday the 13th Part 5. But my favorite movie of the year is an Italian production called Demons. I've got a serious soft spot for the crazy Italian horror movies of the 70s and 80s, and Demons epitomizes all of that Italian insanity in one zombie-filled package that I can't get enough of. And yes, I will continue to insist this is a zombie movie. It just so happens the cause of this zombieism is demonic. Demons was directed by Lamberto Bava, but Dario Argento played a big part in this production as well, and the goal of these two filmmakers was to make a movie that went faster, louder, and more over the top, and I think they accomplished that goal completely. Now, this is the sort of movie that goes completely off the rails, but the setup is classic horror movie stuff, with a group of strangers being lured by free tickets to a Berlin theater. And when one of them cuts herself trying on a demonic mask in the lobby, it begins her transformation into a full-out demon zombie looking to feast on her fellow patrons and spread the zombie infection. When the crowd realizes what's going on, they try to get out, but the exits are sealed. They're trapped inside this place with the growing zombie horde. And since these patrons have nowhere to hide, this movie has a ton of zombie action all over this theater, brought to life with some very gnarly practical effects. Demons is, without a doubt, one of my all-time favorite turn your brain off and just enjoy the show kind of horror movies, and it's perfect for a fun time watch.
You get out of my way!
What's the matter with you?
Holy shit! She's a friend of mine! Hey, babe.
Moving on to 1984, it was a year that saw the launch of a number of franchises, including A Nightmare on Elm Street, Gremlins, Children of the Corn, and Silent Night, Deadly Night, but my favorite movie of the year was supposed to be the last entry in its franchise. I'm talking about Friday the 13th, Part 4, The Final Chapter. Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter isn't just my favorite movie of 1984, it's also my favorite Friday the 13th movie, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels that way, because to me, this is really the perfect Jason film. It opens with the lore of Jason being told by the campfire, and we get to see some of the kills from the first 3 movies as sort of a best-of compilation before this film picks up right where Part 3 left off. Everyone thinks Jason's dead, they've even taken him to the hospital morgue, but it turns out they were wrong. At this point, Jason is settled in on his definitive look, and the franchise has also ditched the 3D gimmicks and brought back Tom Savini, who did the effects on the first film, but was missing in parts 2 and 3. And there's definitely a big step up with the gruesomeness of the kills in this entry in Friday the 13th compared to those films. And this 4th entry in the franchise sticks with the teens being slaughtered near the lake tradition this franchise had become known for, but this entry does contain the most infamous dance scene in 80s horror, thanks to Crispin Glover and his super awkward moves. This entry also has Corey Feldman playing the young hero, Tommy Jarvis, and growing up with this one, it can't be discounted how cool it was to see a nerdy middle school kid taking out Jason in the final moments, just going hog wild with that machete. Moving on to 1983, and there are a lot of big names putting out classic horror. You've got a bunch of Stephen King adaptations, including Cujo and David Cronenberg's The Dead Zone. Cronenberg actually topped himself with his other 1983 release, Videodrome, but for me, it's the combination of Stephen King and John Carpenter that wins the year, and I'm going with Christine. Christine is the most famous killer car in all of horror history and one of John Carpenter's most underrated 1980s entries. Trust me, I love his end-of-the-world movies as much as anyone, but movies like Christine, The Fog, and Halloween really show how great John Carpenter was at capturing the various flavors of small-town horror as well. Of course, this one was based on the Stephen King novel of the same name, also released in 1983, and it follows a high school nerd named Arnie Cunningham who falls in love with a 1958 Plymouth Fury named Christine and is determined to restore the classic car to its former glory. He becomes obsessed with Christine and starts transforming right along with his car, becoming more confident but also a lot more aggressive and quick to anger. His friends and family can tell he's changing, but they don't know that this car came off the assembly line filled with evil, and Christine is a possessive vehicle prone to leaving a trail of bodies in her wake when she doesn't get her way. Christine also features some of the best looking non-gore special effects of the decade, and after a group of bullies smash and crumble the car, Christine is able to completely rebuild herself in a matter of moments as Arnie watches on lovingly. Not only is it impressive from a special effects standpoint, but it's also the moment in this film when it becomes clear that Arnie is fully under Christine's spell.
You wanna watch what you call my car? It's real sensitive.
Moving on to 1982, and this year was ridiculously good, and part of the reason why I had to institute a no repeat rule, because this year not only features low budget gems like Basket Case, Pieces, and The Slumber Party Massacre, it's also got heavy hitters like Creepshow and The Thing. So with King and Carpenter off the board, I gotta go with another classic, Poltergeist. Poltergeist was the product of two great filmmakers, director Tobe Hooper and producer Steven Spielberg, and it completely reinvented the haunted house formula when it came out in 1982. Now for me, this might be the best haunted house movie of all time. Before this one, haunted houses were generally depicted as old and often decrepit, but this tract house in Poltergeist had no previous owners, and the Freelings, they're the first family to live here, doing their version of the American dream with their 3 children, Except no one told this family this new home was built on an old cemetery, and the souls of the folks buried there are none too happy about it.
They're here.
Things start off innocently enough, furniture moving on its own and some bent silverware isn't all that frightening, but well, then night hits, and with it comes a violent storm. And the tree outside literally comes to life and tries to devour their son Robbie, but that's all distraction, so these spirits can pull the daughter Carol Ann into a portal to the other side, kicking off this family's battle with evil to get their little girl back. Now, Poltergeist, it's a movie I grew up watching, and I still enjoy rewatching, thanks to the great performances of this cast, complemented by some practical effects work that's aged beautifully. It's the rare kind of horror movie that's perfect for both longtime horror fans and folks new to the genre, because it doesn't rely on jump scares or gory kills, and at its core, this is a movie about a family overcoming unbelievable odds to defeat the evil haunting their home.
You son of a bitch, you moved the cemetery, but you left the bodies, didn't you?
Moving on to 1981, and in addition to the release of Evil Dead, the slasher boom is in full swing with the release of Halloween 2, Friday the 13th Part 2, The Burning, The Prowler, My Bloody Valentine, and many more. But I'm not going with a slasher for this year, and my pick is An American Werewolf in London. An American Werewolf in London was directed by John Landis, who was best known for comedies like Animal House and The Blues Brothers, so it's not surprising that this is a horror comedy, but it is a unique horror comedy in that this movie starts out pretty light and gets more and more grim as it continues. This film follows two American college students backpacking across the wrong part of rural England, and after a not so welcome reception at the local pub, they head out into the night where they're attacked by a werewolf. Jack is killed, but David survives, waking up weeks later in a London hospital. Now, he may have lived, but all is not well, and when the next full moon rises, it's going to be him transforming into a werewolf. Now, in a sick twist, his friend Jack is stuck in a sort of purgatory along with all of the other werewolf victims, and their souls can only be freed when the werewolf's line is all dead. Jack's increasingly deteriorating looks would be the highlight special effects piece for most horror movies, but An American Werewolf in London outdid itself with an Academy Award-winning werewolf transformation from Rick Baker that literally changed the game. There'd never been a werewolf transformation shown like this before, where the audience is forced to watch David's body stretch and morph itself into this new form as he wails in agony. Also, make sure you pay attention to the music when you watch this one, and count how many times you hear a song with the word moon in the title. It's a fun little Easter egg from the director that I absolutely appreciate.
This is not pretend, David.
I will not be threatened by a walking meatloaf.
All right, it's time to move on to 1980, and my rules mean that I can't choose The Shining, Friday the 13th, or The Fog. Now, I really enjoy some of the more ridiculous movies from that year, like Contamination and Humanoids from the Deep, but this time I am going with a slasher for my pick, and it's Maniac. As the 1980s went on, horror got glossier with bigger budgets and more polished productions, but Maniac, that's still a remnant of the horror movies of the 1970s, when everything felt a little bit grimier and a little bit meaner. And Maniac, that's absolutely a mean as hell movie that's straight up uncomfortable to watch at times. Maniac comes from the director Bill Lustig. He loves shooting guerrilla style, so the film crew were literally taking to the streets of New York City to get these shots however they could, permits be damned. I personally just love the look of film shot in this era of New York. There's a certain scuzziness to the city at this time that I just love seeing on film, and it makes Maniac feel all the more dangerous, like maybe this guy isn't the only serial killer running around these streets. This movie also features yet another appearance from Tom Savini, this time as both the special effects guy and a victim, because word has it that he signed on to this production just so he could blow up his own head in this very graphic slow-motion shotgun blast sequence. Now, ultimately though, it is the performance of Joe Spinell as Frank Zito that makes this movie. It's the rare type of slasher film that spends a lot of its runtime with this killer, Frank Zito, as he's going about his day-to-day, and also as he commits murders. So in other words, you can't watch this film and maintain a distance from this killer. You're with him every step of the way, and if you're looking for the kind of raw horror movie that makes you squirm in your seat, Maniac is a movie you need to see.
I told you not to go out.
Every time you go out, this kind of thing happens.
So there you have it, my favorite horror movie from each year of the 1980s. And I gotta say, this was not an easy list to put together, and there are so many more 80s horror movies that I love that I just didn't have a chance to talk about. It really was an incredible decade for horror, no matter what you're into. So if I didn't mention your favorite 80s horror movie, make sure you let me know about it in the comments down below. And if you dug this video, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. I've got plans for May that I'm pretty excited about, and I know you're not going to want to miss it. In the meantime, you can check out my favorite horror movies from the 90s and the 2000s right here. But that's it for today. I'm CT Reese. Thanks for hanging out with me, and keep watching weird movies. I know I will.